He is a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright, screenwriter, and director responsible for lines like "Always Be Closing" and "He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue. That's the Chicago way." Author of The Untouchables, Glengarry Glen Ross, American Buffalo, and so many others, David Mamet is here. On the place of art in the country today, the origins of that Mamet speak, and his new film, Henry Johnson. Come on. I am Raymond Arroyo. Welcome to Arroyo Grande. Go subscribe to the show now and turn those notifications on so you know what's coming up. David Mamet is a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright, one of the most influential writers in the last 3 decades. American Buffalo, House of Games, Heist, The Verdict, Wag the Dog, and his new film, Henry Johnson. All David Mamet. But where did all of this come from? And how does he see the country now? Here's David Mamet. I want to go back to the beginning. Why did you, of all people, kid growing up in Chicago, when and why did you fall in love with the theater of all things?
Well, you know, they asked Willie Sutton why you robbed banks, and he said, as you know, he said, that's where the money is.
That's where the money is. Oh, even better.
So that's why I got involved in the theater for 2 reasons. Is I was given this wonderful gift to communicate with an audience, which I discovered only because I wanted to get into the theater to meet girls.
Another good motive, money and girls. Those are always the 2 good motivators. But look, you took this very seriously. You go to the neighborhood playhouse, you go to New York, you study with Sandy Meisner. Sanford Meisner was, for those who don't know, kind of a great acting guru, one of the members of the group theater. Did you learn anything from him?
Yes, I did. I studied with Sandy Meisner at one of my teachers at the neighborhood playhouse about 60 years ago. And I learned 3 things. One is I was not born to be an actor. I was always upset and confused by the labyrinthine preparations that's supposed to go into doing the scene. So I was a terrible actor, and then I looked at the people doing the scenes. Some of them were good actors, but they had no idea what they were doing because they were all self-conscious. And the reason that they were self-conscious was that they were trying to remember several things. That my objective is this, and if I substitute that for this, I might understand the objective better, and da-da-da. So they were all self-conscious. So that's the second thing I understood. And the third thing I understood was that Mr. Meisner had no idea what he was talking about. But he was trying to address the essential problem in acting of people who don't have any talent, which is how do I act spontaneously in a situation where the lines are given to me?
Right.
So I started writing plays, and what I realized was he's looking at the wrong thing. He's looking at the lines, but you don't have to find meaning in the lines because the meaning's already in the lines.
Just say the line.
Yeah, you have to simply say the line. The problem is...
The relaxation stuff you don't think had any merit? That whole back and forth thing he used to do, that exercise?
That was called the repeating game. And the idea was you say something and I repeat it.
And I repeat it.
Until something happens to make a change. The problem was that it puts the attention back on oneself. So I said, there's a simpler way of doing it, right? This action, which proves my point, which is the lines are bull. Right? I'm speaking as a playwright. Yeah. You don't have to understand Shakespeare in order to play Shakespeare. You need to say the lines one after the other, and the play will take care of itself. Now, how do we know this? How? Because when people do summer stock, they don't have to do rehearsal, and it's fine. Secondly, everyone's had the experience of going to the high school production of Liz Estrada and saying it was, you know what, it was better than it was on Broadway, which is true. It was better than it wasn't. So what I learned was that Mr. Meisner and Lee Strasberg and all of those guys, there were people who had small experience as actors and some experience as a director, but they were basically the second-rate people. and they wanted to not leave the theater for two reasons. One is because they loved the theater, and two, because they had a vision. And the vision was, how do I get someone to act spontaneously in a situation where the words are known? And the answer is you don't. You tell them to simply say the stupid lines.
Which is basically what you go to Goddard College and you basically teach that. According to Bill Macy, anyway. The character will take care of itself. Just say the damn line.
Yeah, there isn't. The other thing is that there isn't any character. There's nobody there. If you take a script and shake it upside down, it's just words. Where did the character go to school? Well, the character didn't go to school.
But they say you have to build all that biography. You have to build the backstory before you enter the scene, as you prepare. You reject that.
That's nonsense. What do you care deeply about? Tell me.
My family.
Okay.
Freedom.
Okay, so you care deeply about your family, you care deeply about freedom. So I say to you, this is a scene about a guy whose family is being threatened by a neighbor, right?
Okay.
And so what you need to do is very simply to tell the neighbor if it doesn't stop, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. That's all. You need to get a malefactor to stop. Go ahead.
Get the hell out of my house now.
Okay. What do you have to prepare?
Well, you do need the background of the family, yes?
No.
You don't have to be alive to those imaginative circumstances of your scene, the people in your scene. No.
No, of course not. What does it mean to be alive to the... What are you, a liberal? What does that mean to be alive to the imaginative circumstances?
Well, I'm not. The fact is, maybe I don't live in that neighborhood. Or in the case of the movie we're going to discuss, I'm not in prison. I've never been in prison. So how do you put yourself as an actor in that situation if you've never been there before?
I say to you, okay, here's the situation. You're in prison, right? So you're first, and you've been wrongly accused, and you're talking to your lawyer, right? So what's your first reaction?
I need help.
Yeah,
I need to get out of here.
When I say that to you, what's your first reaction?
My first reaction is I'm helpless. I'm trapped. I need help. He's my lifeline.
So there's no difference. What you just did was great acting. There's no difference between the character who is helpless and trapped and doesn't know about it, and you, who the actor, are helpless and trapped and don't know how to play this. It's the same thing.
I see.
So this is what I learned from looking at people fail during the repeating game.
And did you pick anything up from that experience that you poured into your own work? And by that I mean, there is a Mamet universe, I think we can admit to. I think you'd admit to. There is a world that you've created theatrically and in cinema that's different from the chock-a-block world we live in.
Well, yeah, but John Singer Sargent was living in the same world as Paul Clay, but they saw things a little bit differently. You must allow.
Yes, I do. But there's also a musicality to your work, David.
Yeah.
There is a musicality to it. Do you beat it out? Do you say it aloud as you're writing it? How do you work through that?
Sure, I say it aloud, and sometimes I would actually, if something wasn't right, I'd count the beats, because most American speech and most good theatrical speech is written in iambic pentameter, because that's how we speak. That's why Shakespeare's so easy.
And you write in the same meter?
Largely, yes, but also the meter, just like a line in Shakespeare, the meter need not be in the mouth of the protagonist. The line can be broken between me and you.
Right.
Right?
And maintain the meter.
Yeah, because it has to make sense. And most people who write, try to write drama by having the protagonists say what either the writer means or say what the protagonist is trying to get.
The other things, I was totally unaware of Catastrophe, which was a project you filmed, but this was not just any project.
Yeah.
This is Harold Pinter and John Gielgud in his final performance.
Yeah.
Tell me, first of all, about Pinter, because I hear a lot of Pinter
and
when
Rebecca
I hear you.
Pigeon. Now, there's the third character. So Irish Television called up and said, well, we're doing all of Beckett's work. We'd like you to direct one of his works. I said, great, I'll take Waiting for Doe. They said, gosh, that's taken. But there's something nobody's ever heard of called Catastrophe. It's an 8-minute play, and we'd like you to direct that. Okay. So they gave me that, and so I called up Harold Pinter, or as his contemporaries used to call him, Young Harold, and asked him. And then someone said, what about John Gielgud? to play the other guy. So I said, gosh, okay. So Gielgud showed up, so John. He was really striking. I think he was 19, so 19 and change. And he was very tall. He was like 6'1". He was very elegant, and he was dressed up. His street clothes were an Edwardian get-up with a wing collar and so forth. And he was just wonderful.
Why Harold Pinter? Why did you call him up? And did he influence he must have influenced your work.
Of course he did. As a kid, I worked in Chicago at something called the Second City, and it had just been founded. It had been founded a couple of years before, and I worked there because I knew the young girl friend of mine whose father owned it. I worked there as a busboy, and so as a busboy, I got to go and watch the show 3 times a night. It was better than going to school.
Yeah.
And then I was very influenced by the fact that what they were doing was tragido-comedio sketches,
Yeah.
right? And then I read Pinter's A Night Out and review sketches, and I said, wait a second, Pinter is doing exactly the same thing these guys are doing, right? He is, if I may use the word ineffable, he is doing the ineffability of human existence. How can you listen to 3 lines of Pinter, and all of a sudden you're in that neighborhood of dread and blah blah and da da da? But I did say, you know what? I bet you I can do that. So I started writing these sketches, and that's how I started writing drama.
That's where it began.
Yeah.
Tell me about that neighborhood. I mean, you talked about Second City.
Yeah.
You would later found your own little theater troupe.
That's right.
And others were founding their own there as well. But this really became the turning point in American theater, those people.
Yeah, it was the turning point.
Yeah.
Well, Milton Friedman said something really great. He said that the culture and the society has to allow those with talent to reveal themselves. And I thought, man, that's brilliant, right?
But how does that happen?
Well, it happened in Chicago because they relaxed the building codes. And the building codes to build a theater in Chicago were prohibitive because the Iroquois Theater burnt out in 1906, everybody died. So they had these impossible building codes, you couldn't build a theater. And even by bribing the fire department, which was unheard of. So anyway, the building codes were relaxed, and a lot of us were interested in theater who dropped out of college or completed college. And there were these given up neighborhoods, most of them around Halsted Street, the end of Halsted Street in Chicago, which was, a lot of it was given up car barns, because Halsted is the longest street in the city, 27 miles long.
Yeah.
And they had streetcars, and the streetcars went away, but these car barns
Remained.
And so a lot of us moved into them or into storefronts, and we put on plays for nothing. We all had day jobs, and there wasn't any money involved. None at all. We were working to put the thing on, and it was a lot of fun. And the people started coming and say, geez, this is pretty good. And then a guy called Richard Christiansen, who was then the critic for the Chicago Daily News and then for the Tribune,
He came down.
he came and he said, this is the best theater happening any place in the country. And then people from New York started coming in. No, we all said, we don't want your stinking money. And
Not for too long. You didn't say that, David. I just interviewed Gary Sinise not long ago, and we talked about the founding of Steppenwolf. That's really connected to your St. Nicholas Theater.
well, yeah, Laurie Metcalf, who was an original member, worked for us licking envelopes. And she was great. And then she and Gary and John took over our space. We left that space in the car barn in 1973, 74, something like that. And they took the space over.
What was it about that group of people and that time that allowed that freedom, the talent to emerge, as Friedman said?
Well, as I say, it was the fact that the building codes were relaxed. And these neighborhoods were in transition.
So regulation touches the arts in that way. Even
Well,
in that.
sure. The
even,
other thing is that there shouldn't be, they say the Kennedy Center for the Arts, okay, but basically government aid for the arts it's not just money wasted, it's deleterious. The government shouldn't be involved in the arts.
Why not?
Well, because someone's going to be, the problem with government also always is somebody has a good idea, but someone else has to implement it. So that person is either a bureaucrat, a fool, or a thief. Once in a while, is that person going to be knowledgeable, wise? Certainly, but that while hasn't happened yet.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to hopscotch around a little bit. The House of Games emerges. This is the first time you direct a film.
Yeah.
That kind of that had to, for me anyway, it sets the standard, not only for dialogue, incredible, a deep look into the soul and heart of con men on multiple levels. Did that change you in any way or set the bar for you? The cast, that cast of characters, this is the cast you would continue working with really for the rest of your career, and I guess you started with these same people.
Yeah. Well, I knew a lot of con men, a lot of thieves, because when I was coming up, I got out of college, I couldn't work. I took all sorts of menial jobs and worked with a lot of guys who were on the edge. And I worked in a couple of boiler rooms, phone rooms, which were fraudulent. They were selling land that didn't quite exist. And then I started playing a poker game every day with a lot of people who were thieves. And so we'd play poker, then they'd go out and they'd rob at night. I so loved being around them.
Why? Why are you drawn to those con men? Shysters.
Well, why is anybody? I mean, everybody's drawn to con men. Some of us are drawn as victims, right? And some of us are drawn as con men, and some of us are drawn as observers. But you're just like, it wasn't, like Polonius says to Ophelia, love his affections, do not that way tend. I wasn't born to be a con man, but I just loved being around them because they spoke so beautifully. They spoke so poetically. And I said, geez, I love this. I want to write about it. So
it's like magic. It's like magic. It's illusion. It's magic in some ways.
I was working at that point with the great Ricky Jay, who was, rest in peace, he was the greatest performer of the 20th century. He was a magician and expert in the confidence game and consultant and so
it was incredible to watch and see. And he's in many of your films.
He said, yeah. And I just finished another film I'm going to shoot about these con men who find a mark and they're going to sell him the lost Joshua Speed letter that proves beyond a doubt that Abraham Lincoln was gay. Exactly.
You love these grandiose schemes, these cons, the mark, and really the trade-off that people make in manipulation and in being part of that game. I mean, that really runs through all of your work.
Yeah, I love it. I love it a lot. Because, you get older and older and you say, what is there in life that's actually on the level? What is there in the two things that money can't buy? They used to say in Vermont, true love and homegrown tomatoes.
It's a cute line. Tell me about, you mentioned that you worked in a boiler room, you were calling and trying to sell real estate that didn't exist. That no doubt informed Glenn Ross.
Sure it did. What
did you see there that translated into
all of it.
This master work?
See, the other thing is I wasn't brought up to be a salesman. Or I didn't raise my boy to be a soldier. I wasn't brought up to be a salesman. I always felt very bad because they had some guys there. They were dope fiends and they were drug addicts and they were crooks and like that. But they could sell shoes to an octopus, and I couldn't do it. So my job on the first phone was working on the phone, qualifying subjects. I'd say, oh yeah, Mr. Arroyo, thank you. I see that you've sent in this box top saying that you're interested in, I'd like to say to begin that no salesman will call. My name is Dirk Freitag and I work for Web Realty. Our sales manager is going to be, forgive me, but our sales manager is going to be in town this afternoon for about a half an hour. And he asked me to pick out one person with whom he could present our new product. And what's a better time for you?
You're that man.
No, I was just the phone guy. That's all I did.
Wow.
And then I did cold calling, selling carpets for Walton, Walton, Carpets, on the phone. Cold calling means they give you a phone book and say, go crazy.
Did this new Broadway mounting of the play and Patrick Marver, the director, did he reach out to you? Were you in consultation at all on this production or no?
I think he did, and I said some version of, "I'm so glad you're interested in the play. Tell the guys to just say the stupid words."
They're great words. Tell the truth. It's easier to remember.
Easiest thing to remember.
That's it. So many great lines. I mean, oh, by the way, you've heard the critique that the house is too big. They put this in the flippin' Palace Theater on Broadway. That is an enormous barn of a house. Would you have put Glengarry Glen Ross in that house?
I would have put it in Yankee Stadium.
Why?
Because you make more money.
I know, but you can't.
I don't know anything about the reviews because I never read reviews.
Why not?
Because they're either, if they're good, they aren't good enough, and if they're bad, they're devastating. So I stopped reading. The problem is, people call you up and they say, Dave, I haven't talked to you in a long time. You know what they said about you in the Des Moines Register today?
Who's reading the Des Moines Register?
Well, the person who calls
the guy,
up.
yeah, the guy who called you, but you don't care.
Yeah, I don't care.
But so you're not married to the idea that a play has to have a certain capacity. I mean, Glengarry Glen Ross is not Hello Dolly. It's an intimate portrait.
Did you see it?
I have not seen this production. I've seen it before, sure.
Oh, I saw it. There's this guy called Adolf Appia, who was the most famous theatrical designer, I think, of the late 19th, early 20th century. He said the set doesn't make any difference. He said the only thing that's important is the relationship between the stage and the house, which the Greeks knew, right? They knew about that, and they knew about domates, was the little Greek grape leaves. Those were the two things. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's good. I mean, the thing transfers over the footlights. That's what it's got to do. The problem is if you got a death house, that's to say it's just badly designed. But if you got a good design, you don't need a set. Listen, it's possible to do a set which is better than a bare stage, but it's very, very difficult.
How do you do that?
You need a great set designer.
I told you I'm hopscotching. I want to talk about The Untouchables because you said you hung out with thieves and con men. And how much of that informed? I mean, again, the lines come flooding back. It's the Chicago way. You knew Chicago really well. And that side of Chicago, I know you sort of disregarded history when you dove in. I mean, you took the general outline, but you really crafted that whole tale in your own making.
Well, Chicago was the model for the democratic machine which persisted in this country until last November, which is the ultimate machine town, and everybody knew it. You wanted to open the store, you had to kick back the blah, blah. I was a cab driver, you had to buy off the cops. You wanted to get the houses. The question was, what are you going to do for Delahanty after what Delahanty's done for you? Everybody accepted it as a matter of course. Okay, that's the way it works, right? And people I knew in my grandparents' generation knew Al Capone, and they said, he was this great guy, and he was friendly to this and friendly to that. Okay. I went to a high school in Chicago, which was across the street from the garage where they held the St. Valentine's Massacre, and they said at that high school that was part of the mythos that people had heard it and come out and
The mythos.
Yeah.
It happened there, didn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Give me, how persnickety are you about actors? I mean, you've said it a couple of times during our conversation. Say the lines. Just say the lines. How persnickety are you about saying them exactly as written?
Well, let me say this. Imagine you're talking to Franz Liszt, okay?
I think I know where this is going.
Well, yeah, you say, Mr. Liszt, you're great, right? Nobody disputes that. Can I call you Franz? How persnickety about the guys playing exactly the notes that you wrote?
When I just told you it's music and it's iambic pentameter.
Yeah. Listen, if they could do it better, they could write it. Like Ethel Merman was opening in a play on Broadway. She was about to go on, and there's a chorus girl saying, "Oh my God, Miss Merman, aren't you nervous? All the critics are out there." So Ethel says, if they could do it better, they'd be up here.
And you take the same perspective. But you do hold people, as a director, you hold them to the line.
Well, I don't have to hold them to the line. Because I hire I've worked with great actors, and they understand, right? Why would they want to improvise? I mean, I never rehearsed a scene in a movie in my life.
You don't?
No, why? I hire the actors. I say, you got any questions? No, okay, go do it.
Let's go do it. And that's why you work with that team. I mean, you do have that team of actors. It's almost the David Mamet repertory theater.
Well, but you get to meet people new. I just did this movie with Shia LaBeouf and Joanna Kite, and I never worked with them before. They were great. Go up and mix it up.
Yeah.
You know?
Tell me about Spartan. Val Kilmer just died. You worked with him.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Tell me about working with him. And how much research did you do on Spartan?
Well, I had a guy I was working with who'd been in Delta Force. And so we talked a lot about this, we talked a lot about that. It was very, very helpful. And other than that, I was fascinated by that character, right? Of the Delta Force guy, the Navy SEALs guy. But beyond that, it's the organizations that we don't know exist, who once in a while have to hire a guy to go in and kick ass and take names. And that's that guy.
Was Val Kilmer one of those actors that you could just let go?
Oh, he was wonderful. And it was so much night shooting, and so he determined the particular remedy for a night shooting. So here's the thing about movies. When you're directing movies, to a certain extent when you're acting, but more when you're directing, if you aren't sick at the end of the movie, you're not working hard enough. So as you go out nights and nights and nights, you're going into the tank, you're counting on your reserves, and you start going to the chocolate. But then at dawn, we're just unable to move. So he made us a little, every day, he made us a health drink, which was half tomato juice and half horseradish and half vodka. And so we sat around, and he was obsessed with the Commerce Clause. He was a interesting, great constitutionalist, very upset. And so I put that, we did this movie with Al called Phil Spector.
Yeah.
And he's talking about Lenny Bruce. He says, Lenny Bruce, he said, they hounded him so bad at the end of his life, they had him shoot and smack and talk about the Commerce Clause. That's how crazy they had him. So that's
That's
from
your tip
Val.
of the hat to Val.
God, he's a great actor. Oh, what a great actor.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Amazing actor.
Yeah.
And had interesting things and fun things to say about you. You could tell there was an affection there.
No, he was marvelous.
Tell me about Red Belt. This is a movie that doesn't get enough attention. And I bring it up for this reason. You have a way of seeing things far down the line that haven't quite matured yet. You may even see them too early, I would argue, David Mamet.
Oh, premature anti-fascist?
On many fronts, but on this front, just MMA, mixed martial arts. I mean, first of all, what drew you to this, aside from Ed O'Neill, the actor?
Well, I've known Ed forever. We worked together in Chicago 60 years ago.
Wow.
And we were doing a confidence movie in New York called The Spanish Prisoner. And he's one of the con men.
Yep.
And he says, Dave, I just moved out to LA. I met these guys, they're called the Gracie brothers. They're like 5'6", they weigh 140 pounds. They can beat anybody you ever met. They're the most, you gotta meet them. So a few years go by, and I'm having lunch at this joint over here, where I have lunch every day. And there's Ed, who has lunch every day here. And I said, Ed, you told me about these guys. He said, you want to meet them? I say, yeah, why not? He says, oh, they're right there, like 30 feet away was the academy. So I started studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with these guys. I loved it. I did it for 20 plus years. It's the greatest workout in the world because you use every muscle in your body and you aren't aware of it. So anyway, Rickson Gracie, who was the great fighter, God bless him, and unbeatable. And he invited me and my teacher, Renato Magno, down to an event about jiu-jitsu, because he's trying to figure out how to put jiu-jitsu on television, right? And the problem about jiu-jitsu is a lot of times it looks kind of static. And so I was looking at this thing with Hicks, and I was at the control booth with him, and he was looking at it, and I said, what about if we introduce the element of chance? He said, what do you mean? So I said, well, what about if we had people had to take a black or a white thing out, and if they did, they took the black ball out of the urn, you had to strap one of their arms to their side. So he talked about that. Later he said, yeah, no. So I said, well, it's a good idea. So I wrote that movie.
I love it. You were really an early advocate of MMA. I mean, now it's become this global, certainly national, but a global phenomenon now.
It's great. And Dana White, when we were shooting the movie, he said, yeah, what do you need? He said, you need the pyramid, you need this. He was very, very helpful.
Huh.
And so I met so many interesting people in that world, including Gene LaBelle, who was the great champion of judo and a great stuntman. And just marvelous, marvelous people.
What's the difference between writing for yourself when you're going to direct a film and writing for somebody else? Is there a difference when you're writing?
No, there's no difference in the writing. The difference is in the directing, because they're going to f*** it up.
Do you feel they've really effed up your work?
To a certain extent here and there, because look, they have their own vision. The problem is that nobody reads a script. So a lot of people would read my scripts, and in the old days they would pay me pretty good money to write them, but they wouldn't understand them because they would say, I don't understand what's happening here. Right?
What are they missing?
Well, no. What they're missing is I'm writing a script to make them wonder what happens next.
Well, that's why in your films, the films you direct, they're like opening up, it's really like opening up a delicious box of, it's like one of those Russian dolls. You can't keep pulling the heads off, but it's totally not what you expected underneath.
Well, the two things it needs to be, either scene by scene or at the end, is totally not what you expected and acceptable, right?
Plausible.
Yeah, so you look at it and say, oh, now I see. Oh, now I get it. Oh, that's of course, duh. So that, in effect, the drama is just like a joke, right? I lead your mind to its own destruction.
Well, you're your own. You and Rick. When I saw Ricky Jay in all of those movies, I thought, why Ricky Jay? Of all the people he could feature, he's like your Hitchcock, walking through every one of your movies, almost. He really is an avatar for you, though, in some ways.
Sure he is. And the other thing is that performers generally make simply good actors because they know they're doing it for the audience rather for themselves. So I had some really great villains, and I worked with Steve Martin played a villain for me.
In Spanish
right? Tim Allen played a villain for me. And you look at some of the great villains are the comics, right? Yeah. It's Jackie Gleason in The Hustler and Jerry Lewis in The King of Comedy, and on and on and on.
Why is that? Why do you think comics and those who play, particularly people who played before an audience, why do they make better villains?
Because you need to leave it alone. Leave it alone. Tell the joke. The audience will tell you if it's funny or not. You don't need to do it in a funny face.
Yeah.
If the joke is funny, you don't need to help it. And if it's not funny, you can't help it.
You can't.
So that's what comics and performers know. So the problem with a lot of young people coming up, their deficit is they've never performed in front of an audience. Because the audience will teach you right now, oops, I can't do that. You can't call them in tomorrow and ask for a better grade.
They'll let you know right then in real time. Tell me about Henry Johnson, because in some ways this speaks right to what you're talking about. This was a theater project. This is a play that you set in a very small theater in Venice initially.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Tell me where the idea for Henry Johnson came from first.
Well, before I forget, maybe more than most of all the wonderful transformative things I've done in my professional life, I went to kicking and screaming. I said, no, that's not me. I'm worth more than that. No one's going to come. So I went to this kicking and screaming. There was I guess right at the end of COVID, and my friend Marja Lewis Ryan, who directed a couple of plays of mine, a couple of plays of hers, called me up and said, let's do a play. So I said, I want to time with the theater, grumble. So she said, no, come on, we'll do a play, So she said, got anything in your drawer? So I said, well, yeah, I got everything in my drawer. So I took out this play, Henry Johnson, that I'd written. That's what I've done for about 50 years, is I write more or less every day. I write scenes, and some of them become plays and some don't. Some become movies.
And you just file them away?
Yeah, I file them away. So anyway, so Margie read it. She said, okay, we're going to put it on the stage. I said, well, yeah, okay, where are we going to get the money? She said, we'll find the money, it won't cost nothing. So I called up Shai and I called up Evan and Dominic Hoffman and Chris Bauer, and she put the play on. And at the end, Evan and Shia said, we're going to make a movie. Let's make a movie of this.
Everything's as it seems. All the cards are in the deck. It just depends on how you cut them.
It's a sign, you know, of the psychopath.
Yes?
That they're irresistibly charming.
Yes. I mean, why does anyone tell a secret?
Why?
To get one in return.
They came up with a great cinematographer, Sing Wong Hao and Lloyd Sarkey, and we planned it out, and the fellow who funded, his foundation funded the play, who's Sheldon Stone Foundation, they said, yeah, you guys, we put in a little money, we'll put a little money, we'll shoot the damn movie. So we did.
How long did it take you?
Aha. How long is a Chinaman's name?
It's also denotes the distance between beginning and end of the project.
That's true, but as you know, we haven't talked about Anthony Trollope yet today. I think it's time.
Okay.
Anthony Trollope's one of my favorite writers. He wrote the late Victorian. He wrote 47 novels while running the British Post Office, and he got up every day at 5:30 and wrote 2,500 words. And if he finished a novel on 2,000 words, he'd write 500 words of the next. And his books are wonderful. I've read all of them many times. They're just eminently rereadable. They're just marvelous. And he had this great career. And then his reputation fell off the cliff. And Arnold Bennett, who was a little bit later novelist, said, wait a second, why is that? And he said, the reason is at the end of his life, Trollope wrote a great autobiography, which he called My Autobiography. Oh. Go know.
Clever name.
in which he told about his working habits. And people said, well, wait a second, if that's his working habits, I have to relook at that. That can't be any good. So.
The workman, the habitual discipline ended up undermining his reputation, is what you're saying. And that's why you're not telling me how long you shot the movie.
Yeah.
You're worried about the reputational harm that might have
not
been.
at all. It's just, it's like asking a show how long you work on that.
Right. Look, and you would say, look at the film and call me later.
Yeah, exactly so.
Tell me about Henry Johnson. Tell me about the conceit of the play and why you were so fascinated by this idea.
Well, I knew a guy, and he was talking. I said, where you been? He wanted to have lunch. He said, I got to go up to, I can't remember, Lompoc or something like that, to Hatchapee. So, what are you doing up there? So I'm visiting my friend from college. I said, oh, what's he in for? So he says, well, he was having this affair with the woman and she got pregnant and he wanted her to abort the child. And she said no. And he said, oh, I'll pay her to abort the child. And she said no. So he had a little goodbye fling with her, during which he induced an abortifacient into her body and she aborted the child. So he was convicted of
manslaughter
and sexual assault and all sorts of correctly of things.
Yeah.
I said, good. He said, no. I said, why are you going to visit him? He said, well, he's my friend. I said, he's your friend and he did that? Yes. He said, well, he's going to get out in a while. Don't you think he's paid his debt to society? I said, I don't know what his debt to society is, but whoever it isn't that young woman whom he violated. Mm-hmm. And so I started thinking about that and thought, that's... Rebecca West said, all liberal administrations end in bloodshed. Isn't that good? So it was liberal ends in bloodshed. So I thought, well, what about this guy? What else does he do when his friend gets out? And the thing he does is he steals money Henry Johnson to pay for the guy's defense, right? Because the guy's entitled to defense.
Right.
And then Henry Johnson ends up in prison, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And he meets Jean,
who's
Shia LaBeouf's character. And it really is about, if I'm reading this correctly, and again, I haven't seen it, I've only read the reviews and the description so far, but it seems like it's a guy desperate for some moral guidance, and he's looking in all the wrong places.
Sure. Well, the thing is, people with weak, there are a lot of people with weak egos. And in fact, you see them with face masks on yelling death to the Jews. And one of the things about a lot of people with weak egos is you put them with someone who has a foreign accent, and they start talking with the foreign accent, and they'll say, you know, it's so funny, when I'm around people with a foreign accent, I just start talking like that. So Henry Johnson is that on the moral level. You put him around people who are thieves, and you know, we see this in the radical left. You know, things that nobody would do on their own. When you put them in a group, it's Katie barred the door.
Yeah. Tell me, you're releasing this movie, Henry Johnson, and you're releasing it in theaters and on the website simultaneously.
Yeah.
Why did you make that decision?
I didn't make the decision. The producers made the decision. But Steven Soderbergh said something to me maybe 20 years ago when he was one of the first guys to do it. He said, it doesn't make any sense. Why not do it all at once? So I guess it makes sense.
You like that idea of democratizing this, making it available to everybody wherever they are.
Yeah, I think everybody has the inalienable right to buy my products.
It's so kind of you, David. So nice of you. And I was shocked. The LA Times wrote of this
Wait.
Brace yourself.
No.
You'll like this one. The LA Times wrote, this play proves that David Mamet still has much to teach us about the dark side of human relations. LaBeouf is scarily good. That's about as good a rave as you're going to get.
That was the
from
LA Times?
Yeah. Yes.
You know what Will Rogers said about the LA Times, right?
No, what did he say?
He said he was here and he got on a plane and he asked a train and he asked the porter for a newspaper, but he thinks the porter misheard him because he brought him the LA Times.
The LA Times. Well, but in this case, we're going to protect
I love them.
Yeah, now you love them, at least for
I
now.
will defend it to the death their right to say that.
Only that. I get it. You directed this movie, and in your on-directing book, you write that every shot should be uninflected.
Yeah.
Tell people what that means. What is an uninflected shot, and do you still stand by that?
Sure, because the way that film works is through the cut. It's not in the shot. It's not to people. That's the way theater works. We're in a scene, we're talking to each other, this happens, that. But the way that a film works is through a cut. We're talking to each other and I say something to you and you have that look on your face, I don't know what you're going to say next. The audience wants to know what you're going to say next. You cut, right? So, but the shot has to be uninflected. When the actor's helping it, I really want to know what they look like Jasmine Crockett.
Now, this is the first time we've taken theater, directing, and Jasmine Crockett and put all of that together. Only David Mamet could pull that off. There you go.
Please.
You did it. Tell me, I've always been fascinated. You had a religious conversion, a deepening, a return to your faith. And I know you are serious about it. How did that change the way you approach your writing and the subjects of that writing?
Well, I don't think it changed that. It changed the vast amount of everything else in my life. But I don't think it changed the Dennis Prager said something wonderful.
Yeah.
He said he doesn't believe in the Torah because of God. He believes in God because of the Torah. Not genius?
Wow.
So that's how I feel.
You believe in God because of the Torah.
I believe in God anyway, because I look around, and as John Kennedy would say, the only thing not made in China is the world.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Does he work that stuff up at night?
You know, well, we're both from Louisiana, Kennedy and I. He's my senator. So there is something in the water, you know those Louisiana writers. They do have that gift. And boy, does he have it. But I'm sure he works it out. Those lines are too good.
Man. You see, talk about uninflected.
Right.
You couldn't throw all that stuff. He throws it away.
He does. He is funny.
But I'm learning to speak Louisiana
How are you doing that?
because I just came to my audiologist, great guy from New Orleans, right? And so I say, "Hi there, Bubba. How are you today?" And so he says, "Okay, I'm going to give you a lesson. Okay, I'll try it out on you. You ready?
Okay.
How's your mom and them?"
How's your mom and them? Oh, that's good,
great?
David. That's very good.
Thank you. But you know, that calls to mind something else when those effing idiot fools were in the White House and they tried to denature everything moral and good and kind about the United States. They said that the military shouldn't use the phrase "you guys."
You guys.
Remember that? Mm-hmm. And I thought about that. I thought, wait a second, I always admired you Southerners for so many things, but among them is y'all. And I said, we don't have y'all. I said, yes, we do.
Yes.
You guys means y'all. It has nothing to do with sexuality.
That's exactly right.
It's so inclusive.
It's the northern y'all.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. I love the musicality. The same musicality that you've brought and extracted, I would argue, from Chicago.
Yeah.
That's the musicality that you still feel running through, whether it's Anne Rice or it's Senator Kennedy. There's a musicality in the South that we have. Yeah. And it's unique. It's its own thing. You brought up politics. Let's talk about it for a second. Do you feel culturally the political divisions are settling because and in wake of the Trump victory? Or no, you feel it's more amplified?
Both. I got a friend of mine who is a wonderful guy and lives around the corner from me, and talk a little about. And he's married to this wonderful woman for years and years and years. And he lost his house in the fires.
Oh, sorry.
And I was talking to him, like, I ran into him. I said, how terrible it is. He said, it's even worse than that. He said, I don't know if I can stay married anymore. I mean, my wife went back and she's going through the ashes, picking up this. I said, why are this? We're reporting about this, we're fighting about that, da. I just, you know, and I said, baby, this is called post-traumatic stress syndrome. I said, you are so effed up. You and your wife is. You have no idea what's going on. You're gonna have to take a deep breath because everything is cognitive dissonance, everything. And so I really understood post-traumatic stress syndrome for the first time in my life. Huh. And then the people who have kids on the autistic spectrum all get divorced. And I went to a meeting, and the fellow explained why. He said, because it's so difficult, but the two parents who love their kid more than anything in the world are having different experiences. And he said it's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's cycle of grief, denial, acceptance, bargaining, But he said the two people are cycling at different rates.
Oh, they're not in sync.
Always out of sync. So you say, how can you say this? Always out of sync. That's cognitive dissonance. So the left is, the Democratic Party, of course, doesn't exist anymore. So the question is, to what extent is the American populace, the liberals, going to reform? And what happened to the Jews after they left Egypt was cognitive dissonance. They were all so screwed up they wanted to go back. And then they wanted to kill Moses. And then they wanted to worship the golden calf. And then they, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that after Moses shows up, the entire 5 books of Moses is about dealing with the only problem that Moses ever had, which was the Jews, right? Because they're undergoing cognitive dissonance. So what's the answer in the Torah? They had to die out. The generation of the desert had to die out. And so what we're seeing now is the generation of the desert is dying out. And you see it on the right in the rise of the people like J.D. Vance, right? And you see it on the left, that people are going to have to say, the younger people are going to have to say, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. What's happening?
So you're saying the Woodstock generation is on its way out, and that's who we saw in these marches recently.
I mean, if you look at those people, at those marches, right, they're all brain dead 70-year-old gray asexual liberals, right? They can't reform themselves because to do so would be to repudiate everything that they think they stand for.
You, as a dramatist, as a writer, as an observer of culture, how do you see this arc of Donald Trump? How would you dramatize it or show it? Should it be dramatized, by the way?
Well, no. I saw this movie where somebody dramatized Donald Trump. He's dramatic enough. You don't want to gild the lily, right, nor melt refined gold, as it says in the good book. Yeah. It's just, you look at him and you think, what? It's magnificent.
It's an amazing, it's a spectacle, David. We were just at the White House. It's just a spectacle.
But these people exist. And, Theodor Herzl was the founder of the Jewish state, went to the trial of Dreyfus, who was wrongly accused of treason in 1895, and he was being degraded he was a member of the French military. And the people weren't screaming death to the traitor, they were screaming death to the Jews. So Herzl was a very, very successful Viennese dramatist, left. And he said, let me think about this. We need to have our own country, right? And 50 years later, they did, out of nowhere. And Donald Trump, out of nowhere. But it's the American myth. It's Mr. Smith goes to Washington. It's Mr. Regular Guy who finally gets into office and says the emperor has no clothes. It's the American myth, except for him.
And it's played in such it's a dramatic scale. We've never seen anything like this.
No one has.
Just the political comeback, Dave. Have you ever seen a historical precedent for it?
There isn't one. The closest that I can get is if you read contemporary accounts of George Washington, where everybody says we came into a room and people were awed, and he was quiet and soft-spoken. They just said, yes, okay, I'll give my life to you.
Mm. And that you think we're seeing a new iteration of that?
I know we are. It's the Second American Revolution that none of us ever thought was possible.
I know you're concerned about the state of America as a culture, we as a people. You keep returning to this theme, how the arts and the manners, the way we live our lives, how all of that is really contributing to who we are and our future. It's very concerning to you, though, personally.
I always thought I was going to end up as a derelict, because I didn't have any skills. And then I discovered I knew how to write. And then I discovered I lived in a country where if I worked at it and was good at it and got lucky and persevered, I could actually make a living. I'm crazy about this country. My grandparents came here with nothing. And my grandmother, who raised my dad as a single mom during the Depression, who didn't speak very good English, sent him to Northwestern University Law School, where he graduated first in his class. I love this country. And I think that I wrote a play about it called November. Yeah. I said, when we get around to the water cooler, we all kind of like the same things. We had to evacuate my house because of the fires. And we ended up in a hotel, two of us with our two dogs, everyone else, a mother and father, kids, blah, 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 scramped up together in a mainly liberal community. Everyone got along like wildfire. And a lot of those people suffered tremendous losses. And our house was spared, thank God. Everyone was filled with compassion for their neighbors and concern for their neighbors and the desire to be polite, because we were all in it together. And that's what Trump is saying. That's the state of America. Dudes, we're all in it together.
Yeah.
Let's scrape the scum off the top, they call them the politicians, and take, as Milton Friedman said, let's take it back to the kitchen table.
Right.
What does it cost? What do I get out of it? Yeah. When do I reevaluate?
And that's when we're healthiest, when it's about the people and when they're in charge of their destiny.
Of course.
Yeah. You mentioned November, which is a great play.
Oh, thanks.
I wrote a book about the origin of that turkey pardon, which was Tad Lincoln. It was Lincoln's son.
I didn't know that.
It was Tad Lincoln who, they brought the Christmas turkey to the house, and his brother Willie had died.
Yeah.
So he befriended this turkey. He taught it tricks. He trained it. Well, Christmas came around. They pick up the turkey to go kill it for the feast.
Yeah.
He's broken down. He grabs his turkey. He runs up the stairs. And as he saw his father pardon all of the men who were in the field of battle during the Civil War,
Yeah.
he goes and says, "Daddy, pardon my turkey. Please pardon him," which he does,
Wow.
which is the beautiful origin story of the turkey pardon, which I know you didn't tell that tale, but you did tell it is about a president pardoning a couple of turkeys and really about the whole, and a meditation on where we are as a country. That play was not warmly received by the critics because you had already done your "I'm a reformed liberal"
No, it's the other way around.
manifesto, or you were about to.
No, I wrote it, when I did that play, the New York Times writer from a newspaper asked me to write about the play. So I said, well, it's really about political civility. And I said, my understanding of political civility is I tell you what I believe, and you tell me what you believe, and we find, and they say, wait a second, okay, good, I get that. Now I have to say your position such that you say that's right. And you have to say my position such that I say that's right. Now we proceed to the facts. We say, what can we agree on? This, no, throw it out. This, no, throw it out. This, yes. So then we proceed with the things upon which we agree, and we proceed from there. That's political civility.
Yeah.
So I wrote this article. It was the Village Voice.
Village
I
Voice, yeah.
said, I'm not even politically civil to myself. For my whole life, I referred to myself as a brain-dead liberal. Next Thursday, the whole front page of the Village Voice. Why I am no longer a brain-dead liberal. Boom. Bye-bye.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought it was the other way around.
No, NPR lost my number. New York Times, the New York, everybody lost my number. So I said, okay.
So it caused a moment of, it was kind of accidental then.
It was completely accidental.
Wow. I guess that's not how I remember it. And even when I read it, I thought, oh, this happened, and then everything else proceeded. It was really a reflection on a play, and at the heart of the play.
And the whole heart of the play, the raisonneur, is the woman who's the speechwriter.
Yeah.
She says, we say we're a country divided, but we aren't. She says, we're American citizens. We laugh at the same jokes. When we make the quota, we whap each other on the back. And I'm not at all sure that we don't love each other. So that, what I thought was my love letter to America.
America.
Yeah.
Last time we talked about your memoir, Everywhere in Oink Oink. And it was kind of a takedown, scalding, hilarious analysis of Hollywood and how it got here. Really, the whole culture.
Yeah.
Where is Hollywood now,
Well,
in your estimation?
it's over. There's several reasons. It's run its course. That the movie industry, after it came to fruition, or as my son would say, fruition, it's they owned the theaters. They had to divest from them in, I think, 58 or something like that. They had a completely vertically integrated everything. They bought up the product, they made the product, they distributed the product. It was a cash business. There was a lot of theft. But they don't own the theaters anymore, and there's no reason for the infrastructure. Within 10 miles of it, there's 40,000 people involved doing nothing.
Yeah.
Zero. When you look at all these influences on whatever, TikTok and
TikTok and YouTube and, yeah.
it's the present. The other thing is, not only don't you need a lot of technology here, you don't need a lot of infrastructure out there, because you could do with CGI. You don't have to, and you don't have to be so finicky because it's all going to be seen on a small screen. Yeah. So it's not 40 by 30 feet anymore. It's 3 by 4 inches.
Yeah. It's changed everything.
Yeah.
What do you make of the Snow White debacle, where Disney went pillaging their great 1938 classic cartoon?
Yeah.
Which it's such, I rewatched it recently, it's such a beautiful piece.
Yeah.
Why would you ever try to remake that or do a live action version of it?
Well, why did they have World War II when World War I worked out so well?
Yeah. Because they could.
Exactly so.
And as we said at the start, because that's where the money is.
That's where the money is. I mean, also, you know, Peter Dinklage, a great actor. He's a little person. He goes, wait a second. Dude,
What about us?
are you kidding me?
But they seriously changed the storyline. They broke the story and the chain of the story that people loved. When you do that, I mean, yes, the actress was also doing her own political sideshow and protest movement. But aside from her, the thing itself is corrupted. It's not Snow White. It's not the Grimm's brothers or even Disney's iteration of the Grimm's brothers tale any longer. That's what happened there. That's why I think it really
I've never believed in Disney because I saw a Fantasia. Did you ever see Fantasia?
I did.
Where they have hippos
Dancing.
belly dance. That's, come on. I mean, yes, they could have stood to lose a few pounds.
Yeah, but but he did have a striking vision, and he did remake the American imagination in many ways.
Uh-huh.
And people come to expect something. If I say I'm giving you David Mamet's Glengarry Glen Ross, and we have 6 drag queens at a brunch, something's off here. And if I start pulling your storyline out, and suddenly it's not about real estate, it's about selling dresses, we're in different territory now. That's essentially what they did with this, keeping the veneer of the exterior, but mangling
But see, these are all corporate decisions. None of those people who made those decisions, they all thought they were going to be held responsible, or all communally responsible, and they never spent time sitting in a theater watching how people reacted. The other thing, the reason there's a death of Hollywood, is that it's no longer important to see how people react to a certain extent because you're selling them a subscription. So you want this big thing over here, buy all of this trash over here.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's the dark side of the subscription thing.
Yeah.
You really don't have to be attentive to the audience anymore.
Yeah.
You just keep peddling. They're going to swallow whatever you give them.
That's why I like the news, especially Fox News, because it's funny.
So you come to be entertained about breaking news and current
We
events.
all?
Yeah, I
But
guess.
the other thing is, you look at these other legacy guys with this dour look on their face all the time. Like, why?
It's a bad ride. I always say it's a bad
Terrible.
ride.
Listen, if I want to put a paper bag over my head and suffocate, I can do that without the help of CBS News.
Okay, there's a series of questions I ask everybody who's here.
Uh-oh.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
This is the Arroyo Grande questionnaire. Who is the person you most admire, David?
The person I most admire today?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a very good question. It's Donald Trump.
Wow. Why? Probably because of what we discussed a little earlier.
Because he looked at something that was impossible, which was the resurrection of, forgive me, I'm going to say it, the American dream, and said, okay, what we need to have happen. And he was treated worse than any American citizen in history, and nothing faced him. And I heard something Melania said, that he came down before he ran in 24.
Yeah.
She said, are you going to run again? He said, yes. And she said, I hope you don't. And he said, why? And she said, because you'll win. Isn't that great?
Who is the person you most despise?
Well, I despise a lot of people, but when I do, I try to remember that I should probably despise myself first. Because the reason I find their behavior despicable is because the potential, if not the actuality, is in myself. Right? So yes, it's Chuck Schumer.
But spoken like a playwright. I like that. You're empathizing with the bad guy.
Apparently he wrote a book, Chuck Schumer, called Anti-Semitism in America.
He did.
And I thought, how dare he, somebody who's dissed Israel and dissed the prime minister and withheld aid to Israel. And now he writes a book called Anti-Semitism in America. But I read, the subtitle says, A Quick Start Guide.
Oh, is that right? It's just a quick start. Well, you got to start somewhere, David.
That's right.
What's the greatest feature and best feature in humanity?
And my feature film?
No, feature like the feature you have, the thing you possess. What is your best feature? Or the best in humanity?
I think I'm very understanding and forgiving to all the swine who don't understand my work.
And you write great books about them. Most importantly, your memoirs are worth the trip. What's your favorite meal?
Oh, that's a very good question. My wife makes this wonderful sardines and breadcrumbs. It's crazy good.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've never had that.
Yeah, it's yummy.
Sardines and breadcrumbs.
Yeah, she's been cooking out of a Sicilian cookbook. Your
Your favorite book and the last book you read?
My favorite book, golly, I don't know. I read the works of in English of Vasily Grossman last year, who was is the greatest writer of the 20th century. He's a Russian, and he was, among other things, the reporter for Red Star, which was their Stars and Stripes. And he was at the front all through Stalingrad. He was at the liberation of whichever camp they liberated. I think it was Birkenau.
And why did you want to dive into his complete works?
Well, because I read one, then I read them all.
Oh, you couldn't stop.
Yeah.
You binge read them.
Yeah.
Was that the last book you read?
No. What I've been reading lately? Oh, I've been reading the works of Ross Thomas lately, who was an American crime writer. He wrote 40 books, they're a lot of fun. And he also said something, one of the best things I ever heard. He was an alcoholic, and he was at Dan Tanish or something with Ross McDonald, who was another big drinker, the middle of the day. And they sit down in the red booth at Ross, and the waiter comes over and says, "What can I get you, gentlemen?" And Ross Thomas says, "A couple of double martinis." And the waiter says, "Oliver Twist." And Ross Thomas says, "We'll order later." Isn't that great?
It's great. I love it. Tell me, what do you fear, David Mamet?
You know what I think? I think I fear disgrace. I fear doing, and that's what a lot of my reading, especially about the Victorians, and a lot of my writing is about guys who make one false move, how close we are to, that's what film noir is mainly about, how close we are to just stepping off the sidewalk and
right over the edge.
Whoops. Right.
What do you know that no one else knows?
Preston Sturges was the great comedic director. His movies are just
brilliant.
You don't even want to watch them, you want to eat them. And he wrote a wonderful movie called Hail the Conquering Hero, where this Eddie Bracken is dismissed from the Marine Corps because he has allergies, and he so wants to be in the Marine Corps, and he's going home, but he can't tell them he's been dismissed. And so these Marines show up and they say, "Come on, we'll put you in a Marine uniform, you'll get off the thing and everything will be fine." When he goes there are these two bands. One of them is playing Hail the Conquering Hero, and one of them is playing the Star-Spangled Banner, or American the Beautiful. And then I was reading a book by Mary Elizabeth Braddon, who I'll tell you about in a second, who describes that same scene, written in about 1885. A hero gets off, and these two bands, one playing Hail. So obviously I know that Preston Sturges read that book.
Read that book. I know, but the question was, what do you know that no one else knows?
I know that.
That's it?
Oh, I'll tell you another one.
Okay, give me another one.
This gets a little bit arcane. There was, in reading about the First World War, about flyers in the First World War, there was a ditty. They said he died with his hand on the throttle, and this is the reason he died. He forgot to recall that iota is the maximum angle of glide, right? So the question is, what does that mean? So I'm trying to think, what does it mean?
Iota.
What does iota mean?
You're off by that much?
But what does it mean?
Yeah,
off by what? So, and iota is always written in caps, so I'm thinking it doesn't mean, what is the maximum angle of glide? There's no such thing.
Yeah.
But there's such a thing called the angle of maximum glide. So what's the angle of maximum glide on an airplane, right? It's indicated by the airspeed. Every airplane has a maximum angle.
I see.
You're going to get the maximum glide on this airspeed, because you increase the airspeed by putting the nose down, you're going to increase the airspeed, but
and go smash.
Yeah.
Wow.
So and you can put the nose up, and you'll be up longer, but you're going to smash too. So I started looking on pictures of old airplanes, and I thought, how would you find the angle of maximum glide. What would iota mean? What would be indicated on the airspeed? So I look on the airspeed, and it is.
It's indicated.
Yeah. So he forgot to recall that indicated on the airspeed is the maximum angle. So I figured that out.
I love that. I love that.
What's it good for? I always thought, if it's not good for anything, I'll remember it.
You'll remember it and you'll use it in a screenplay or a play, which I will be staying tuned for. What is the greatest virtue?
I think it's courage, don't you?
Honesty?
Uh-huh.
Truthfulness?
Well, the other thing is,
But yeah.
a lot of times you need, perhaps it's the preliminary virtue. If you don't have courage, what good is honesty?
Yeah, that's very true. But if you could live anywhere and you weren't here, where would you be?
Why would I want to live anywhere but here?
I don't blame you. I like it here myself, as a matter of fact.
We live around here. My wife likes it here. I always try to get her out of Southern California. I live here because I want to be close to my taxes.
Well, you can see them being used in such fascinating ways all around you.
I wanted to get a T-shirt made and wear it today, which said, "Save water, support Karen Bass." I should have done that.
Next time, we'll do that in the next. We'll do that in the next one. What's your biggest regret? Do you have one?
Well, most of my regrets, yeah. I did a lot of stuff in my life that I regret, and at some point you got to say that God says, I know, but they say prayer and study and good works moderate the severity of the decree. So there's a lot of stuff that I regret. But, and then I have a lot of real estate regrets. Of course, who doesn't?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, especially Californians. They always have those regrets. What's the best piece of advice you ever received? Either professionally or personally?
Oh, I wrote these series of sketches I did in Chicago in a little 40-seat theater with Billy Macy and J.J. Johnston. It was called American Buffalo. It was a series, and then we did it in New York at the...
Oh, that little thing.
No, it was before it was on Broadway. So something called the Showcase Code. For a moment, Actors Equity forgot that they're insane. And so they said, well, anybody can do, in a 100-seat theater, 99-seat theater, anybody can do 12 performances if everyone's working for nothing. So we did this play in this little 12 performances, a little 100-seat theater off Broadway. I thought it was pretty good. And Ulu Grossbard, who was a director, a very good director, came up to me and said, if you figure out the plot, I'll put you on Broadway. And so he did.
That's how it happened.
Mm-hmm.
If you can figure out the plot, that can apply to a ton of things, David.
Sure.
If you can figure out the plot, I'll put you on Broadway. I will remember that.
Oh, good.
I like that line. If you weren't doing what you're doing, if you weren't writing, if you weren't directing, if you weren't telling stories, what would you be doing?
Well, I don't know. I flew airplanes for a number of years, and I aged out of it. And I loved every minute of it. Had I started 10, 20, 30 years earlier, I would have liked to have been a pilot. I was a pilot. I am a pilot. But what would I be doing now?
Yeah.
That's a very good question, and I think I spend most of my days thinking about it. I'm in the midst of various projects right now. I got a couple books coming out, and I'm doing a lot of cartooning for Barry Weiss at the Free Press.
Yes.
I do a cartoon every week.
I see them. What happens when this is over, David?
When what is over?
When it's all over.
Well, it's never all over.
When it's over for us.
Oh, you mean when we die?
Yeah. What happens when it's over?
Well, I said to my wife, I just hope one thing for you, you don't marry a lawyer.
Is that what you think's going to happen?
I said, if you're thinking about it, I want you to bury me on a rotisserie so I can roll over in the grave all the time.
David Mamet, it's always
What
a
a
joy.
pleasure.
I always love being with you. And
Likewise.
I feel full when I finish talking to you. And it's like when I read one of your plays or watch one of your films, you just feel reinvigorated again. And I think that's the whole purpose, right?
Well, I and all of my people love watching you and Laura play the dozens.
We're laughing through the pain, David. We're laughing through the pain. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's the Hole. If you find the plot, they'll bring it to Broadway. Don't just go through the motions. Organize what you are doing. Find the reason, find the purpose. And I love David Mamet's writing advice. He writes every day, and he keeps writing in the heat, in a gush, he once said. That's the best approach for any brainstorming or planning as well. Get it all out in the moment, in the frothy heat. You can always revise it later, I promise. David Mamet's new film, Henry Johnson, is available for download starting May 9th. It's available at henryjohnsonmovie.com. And Shia LaBeouf is incredible in it. I hope you'll come back to Arroyo Grande soon. Why live a dry trickle of a life when if you fill it with good things, it can flow into a broad, thriving Arroyo Grande? I'm Raymond Arroyo. Make sure you subscribe, like this episode. Thanks for diving in, and we'll see you next time. Arroyo Grande is produced in partnership with iHeart Podcasts and is available on the iHeart Radio app or wherever you get your podcasts.